Today in the Handcrafted Garden, I have two projects in mind. Number one, I have some bulbs that need to be divided because they've made a great big clump and they're really too close together now. And I'm also going to do some bulb chipping, which is how you propagate a bulb. So let's get started. Here I have a patch of Hoya Santa. The common name is a root beer plant, and it's actually a herb. When you break the stems, it smells exactly like root beer. And you can imagine the kinds of grilling things that you can do with a piece of meat wrapped in a root beer plant. I'll let you look up that for later. But underneath the root beer plant are my snowdrops. And snowdrops need sun in the spring when they bloom, and then they can take some shade once they go dormant. And so in the early spring, my Hoya Santa is dormant all the way to the ground. And so the snowdrops get all kinds of sun while they're blooming, and then later in the spring, the Hoya Santa comes up and provides shade for the entire area. So this is what's left of the greenery on my snowdrops. And you can see there are drip lines going through here, and I'm gonna very carefully dig around the drip lines, and I'm gonna capture the bulbs that are in the ground, and we're gonna divide them and chip them. And this is a flower bed where I have some hardy perennials coming in, and finally their root systems are taking over the bed. And I have a nice little clump of Byzantine gladiolas in the middle, and I need to move them because they're about to be invaded by the blue mist flower on this side and the fall aster on the other side. So I'm gonna get these guys out of the ground, and then we'll go to the planting bench and take a look at the bulbs. All right, so I have my snowdrop bulbs in this clump, and I have my Byzantine gladiolas in this clump. And I'm going to divide them, and then I'm gonna chip the bulbs to propagate them. And what you need to do that is a sanitizing solution, and this is 10% bleach. That's 1 part bleach and 9 parts water, and that will kill the germs and bacteria on the bulbs. I need fresh water for rinsing the bulbs. I need some sanitizing wipes for my nippers. I need a very, very sharp knife and a cutting board that I'm gonna sanitize. And I need some gloves to wear when I do that. And off to the side, I have powdered sulfur, and I use that to prevent fungus. I also have vermiculite, and that's very important. Vermiculite is a sterile potting medium, and it's what we're going to put the bulbs in after they're chipped. And then I have some zipper bags to hold them. So let's take a look at what we have here. When you're dividing bulbs, you always want to do this when they are dormant. And so it is late summer, and there's a few green leaves left only because they've been in the moist shade. The bulbs have gone dormant enough to do this. So this is my snowdrop, and you'll see a picture of the snowdrops on the screen. This is a very old-fashioned bulb. It's a very slow-growing bulb. It doesn't divide very often, and so it's a good one to use for chipping. And so the first thing you do is you clean off the bulb. Any bits of dirt or papery shells on the bulb, you want to clean that all off. And I'm going to rinse it off in a second. But if you look at the bulb, this is the basal plate. It's on the rounded bottom of the bulb. It's where the roots come out. And this is the tip where the plant comes from. And the tip is always up, and the basal plate is always down when you plant. And we're just going to trim off those roots without touching the basal plate. We don't want to destroy the basal plate. And then we're going to dip off the tip of it. And if there's a little skin there, you can go ahead and peel it off. Think of it like an onion. You want that outer layer peeled off of it, and you want to have nice clean flesh showing. You want to get all of the dirt off in the water. And once you get it clean, we're going to dip it in the sanitizing solution, You don't want to leave it there very long. Shake it off. You want your sanitizing wipe to wipe off your pad first. Then you can put your bulb on the clean pad. So that's the snowdrop. On this side we have the Byzantine gladiolas, and they're in clay because gladiolas prefer clay, and I have a spot of clay in my flower bed, which is why I planted them there. This is the bulb. This bulb is a little more brown. This one looks like it might have had some, yes it has, it's had some damage to that basal plate, and so I'm not going to chip this one. I will plant it because it may grow back, but I want to get one that hasn't been damaged. And I'm going to peel off this papery layer. Now a bulb is filled with layers, just like an onion, and each of those layers is actually a leaf, and they are a series of leaves that are packed inside the bulb. And a bulb actually has everything it needs in the bulb to grow a plant that will bloom and go to seed. And they can do that without any soil at all. And many of them can do that without any water at all. Put it in the water. I think I might have misspoke on that. They do need water, but they can grow without being in soil. I'm going to make sure I don't have any roots. I'm going to nip off this little dead tip. And then I'm going to put it in my sanitizing solution. And I'm going to let them dry. Now I have two set aside that have already dried, and I'm going to bring those over here. And I'm going to sanitize my nippers. When you chip a bulb, it's going to be sitting in moist soil for 12 weeks. And if you think about moist soil sitting in a sealed bag for 12 weeks, the first thing you think about is mold and mildew and bacteria, and it's turning green and it's turning orange, because that's exactly what happens in a wet environment. That's why you use vermiculite, which is sterile, and that's why you sanitize your bulbs before you cut them. It's why I sanitized my pad and I sanitized my nippers, and I'm putting on gloves. So I've taken a minute off screen just to sanitize everything and make sure that I've got a nice clean surface, and we've zoomed in the camera so you can see what I'm doing. And so to chip a bulb, you need a piece of the basal plate involved, because the basal plate is the active part of the bulb that causes it to grow roots into the ground. Now this bulb has everything it needs to sprout and grow a bloom even without the root, but it's helpful for the long-term survival of the plant for it to actually grow a root and support itself through the growing season. And so we need to have part of the basal plate with that rooting piece in it, and we need part of the tip for the growing piece. And then inside the bulb are the leaves that are packed in those layers. And so once it's chipped, it will actually grow little bulblets between the leaves, and they will be attached to the basal plate. And so what you want to do is get a nice straight line going right through the basal plate and right through the tip. And you want to use a really sharp knife, a clean knife, and you want to cut straight through, just like that. And you can see how the basal plate comes up into the bulb with the growing area for the roots to take off. Now I can actually cut it into fourths. If it was a larger bulb, like an amaryllis bulb, you can actually cut it into 16 separate pieces that will actually grow little bulblets and become a new plant. So just like that. And so this is the snowdrop, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Actually, I'm going to sanitize my knife one more time because it just went through another bulb, and if there's bacteria on that bulb, I don't want to share it with my snowdrop. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to get it lined up really nice. And this snowdrop bulb is a whole lot softer than the gladiola bulb. But you can kind of see the lines coming out here. Think of an onion in layers. Those layers are leaves. And I've got a nice center on the basal plate and right through the growing tip. Right there. And right there. Now you're going to see a supply list on the screen in a few minutes that's going to tell you the things that you might need that are off screen at the moment. But now that I've got it cut, I'm actually going to dip it in the sanitizing solution again, just taking an extra precaution. There are other kinds of sanitizing solutions you can use. One that I can think of off the top of my head is actually 70% isopropyl alcohol. You can use it straight out of the bottle. It's not something you want to leave your plant, your bulb in, but it is something that will kill the germs, the bacteria, the fungi on your bulbs, so that you don't take those things into the bag where it's going to sit for 12 weeks. Okay, so my bulbs are dry and I have vermiculite. Vermiculite is a mineral that expands when it's heated, and it's great for holding moisture around the plant's roots. And it's a sterile medium, so if you need a sterile environment, it's a great choice. I also have some powdered sulfur, and sulfur will help to prevent fungus from growing on the bulbs while they're in the bag. And so the first thing we do with gloves on is put 9 parts vermiculite in the bag with 1 part of water. And this is distilled water, so I'm not adding any chlorine or other things that might be added to the water supply. And there's also no bacteria floating around in it. And you just mix it up. And then you dip your bulbs in the sulfur, tap them off, drop them in. You blow into the bag. And seal it. Now the bulbs are going to need to be kept in a cool, dry place for 12 weeks. And it needs to be a place that has about a 70-degree temperature. So think of a closet in the house maybe to do that. And while it's in the closet, you need to check on them once a week. And what you're doing is you're finding the little chips and you're actually feeling of them, putting a little pressure on them and making sure they're firm. And if they're mushy, that means that they need to be removed immediately. So if you find a mushy bulb, open the bag, take it out, throw it away, blow in the bag, seal it again, and put it back in the closet for another week. And you'll do this for 12 weeks. And by the end of 12 weeks, you should be able to take your chipped bulb out and see little bulblets forming on the leaves in the chip. And at that point, you can get a pot of soil, plant them in the pot, cover them with about 1 inch of soil, and let them sprout and grow. This method of propagation is a great one for the heirloom bulbs that divide very slowly, because the chipping process takes time and the growing process takes time. Once you've planted your little chips, they're going to grow baby plants, and it'll take a few years for those plants to become mature enough to actually bloom. And so it's a time-consuming process, but if you're successful, you can take one bulb and turn it into 16 new plants in just a few short years. And that's a pretty good division rate for a bulb that very slowly divides over time. So thanks for joining me in the Handcrafted Garden. I hope you have learned a new skill and learned a little bit of the science behind why bulb chipping actually works. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you liked it, please click that like button and become a subscriber. I'll see you next time.